Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Cindy Bloom. We are filming from our Tax Leadership Conference. I'm so delighted to be joined today by Craig Stromberg. Craig, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So you gave a talk this morning, and it was titled Navigating Disequilibrium. And I think no better place to start than the U.S. elections, which, as of this taping, were yesterday. So talk about the impact of the midterm elections, the United States position in the world, the relationship with the world, and what that means globally.
So I think there's two things to think about here, right? There's the affect of policy and there's the affect of global brand, right? In terms of the affect of policy, what it probably means, as we expected, was there's going to be a divided government.
Right.
I think one of the things to think about, though, is that one of the few areas, as you all know, where there's general agreement in Washington across the aisle is on the fact that US and China are strategic competitors, and the government probably needs to be doing more about that.
Right.
So policies that some of our clients may think are punitive, those may actually increase because there may be common ground that can be found, and there may be a search for any common ground. I think in terms of global brand, though, as foreign investors and foreign officials look at the US, they increasingly see a population that is very polarized and a country that they don't completely understand anymore.
Right.
And this has the risk of potentially changing the way that foreign investment happens here, the way that people get placed here, they rotate through here and study here. So polarization has a lot of long-term effects beyond just, the election and its story.
Right. So let me stay on this point for a second, because you brought up China, and I want to talk about that relationship and how that has shifted, and particularly at this point, how are businesses looking at that relationship and how are they navigating that?
So what's happening as you look around the world, and this relates to the first question you asked, is that if you look at world capitals, and pick your world capitals, right? Nairobi, Cairo, Tehran, Moscow, Beijing, Washington. The one that is increasingly the most complex, the most reactive, the most challenging for businesses to figure out is Washington.
Right.
In part, that is because the US is having a very difficult time figuring out what to do about China. China is a strategic competitor in terms of its economy, its diplomacy, its technology leadership, but it's also a strategic competitor that does not want conflict with us. And this is unique in US history, right? We've never had a primary competitor that wanted to avoid a clash with us.
Right.
And they're very diligent about wanting to do this. What's happening is that US companies are being caught in between two problem sets. Problem set one is that in China, the cost of compliance with data and cyber laws is going up, so that for some companies, it is equating to or approaching revenue. Problem two is that problem one is causing them to say, or at least ask, if not China, where?
Right.
And the problem with if not China, where is the only other market where you can get the talent, the funding, the infrastructure, the logistics, the way that you have it in China is the United States, which the labor arbitrage just doesn't work. So at the end of the day, a lot of them are going to search for alternatives and probably end up staying in China. What's happening on the US side, though, is that the US is making it harder for those same companies, and this is the other pull that's pulling on them, to stay and do business in China. And in the technology sector, the US is, far sooner than I thought they would, pushing technology decoupling with China in a way that is very difficult for businesses to anticipate and deal with, because they don't know when it stops or where it's going to go. And I don't think it's likely that the technology sector is the only one that's going to have to deal with this.
Right. Okay. There are a lot of, and just with China itself, there are so many issues that companies are dealing with. But let's move over to the C-suite. And, the world has shifted in so many ways over the past several years. Talk about what you're seeing C-suite struggling with. What are some of the biggest issues that they're focused on?
So I think there are three. I think the first one is CEOs are people too, right?
True.
And they're exhausted.
Yeah.
Like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Like they've lived through 32 months of this. Okay. They want to get back to having a predictable environment. I have to imagine that we have a lot of CEOs that we talk to that are walking out of the elevator down to their suite every day, past the pictures of all of their predecessors,
Right.
and just thinking, all of you had this easy. All of you lived in a world where you could expect some stability. And I have to manage this company through disequilibrium. It does not seem to end. So they're exhausted. They're looking for answers. And part of the challenge is that there really isn't in most C-suites somebody there to give the answers. Right. In a time of equilibrium where this quarter is going to look in the world a lot like the next quarter, you don't need somebody there to talk to the CEO about the things that we talk about.
Right.
But in a world of disequilibrium, you have to have that. And that's not built into the structure of the modern C-suite. There is no corporate geopolitical or macroeconomic officer. So they still need the help and they don't know where to get it. And so I think a lot of them are struggling where to find that voice of guidance to help them through what is going to be many quarters to come of disequilibrium.
All right. And I want to switch now to talking about the pandemic, COVID, which really upended how we live and work. And when it comes to how we work and where we work, boy, has that changed. So it's still evolving. And I figured that the effect of the pandemic and of the virus, we're going to continue to see it for years to come. So today, when it comes to work, when it comes to just how we're living post the intense part of this pandemic, what are your thoughts about that?
So I think there's a couple of things here. Just like CEOs are people too, workers are people too. And I think we've been so focused on COVID and on the pathogen part of this that many of us have missed the massive crisis of mental health, that has occurred from big scale to small scale for people. People are tired, right? They're anxious. They want some normalcy. These things are affecting them and their families every day. And much of what they used to be able to get, like stability in childcare, right? Stability in school schedules, stability of just being able to schedule a vacation and go when you want to go. Many of those basic expectations have been upended by the pandemic. And even as we sort of enter out of it, that's still happening.
Yeah.
So this means that a lot of them are changing the way they work. And it's not just remote work. It's really changing how much energy they have to give to jobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, we're talking about hundreds of thousands and millions of people just in the US economy, they're just not able to give on a weekly and monthly basis everything they used to be able to give. That has an effect on companies and that has an effect on the economy. And you add to that there are millions of workers, right? Be they immigrants or people who retired early or people who left the workforce to take care of their families that have not yet come back.
Right.
And all of that revenue, right? All of that addition to GDP, it's missing.
Right.
And because of the fact that they are exhausted too, we don't know when they're coming back.
Yeah.
And this will be a very long recovery. And the end of it is a destination we do not yet know.
Right. And it's not just the revenue piece of it, but the people part, which is that if you go someplace where you were expecting a certain level of, let's say, service or speed or, the quality of the product that you're getting, if you're short-staffed, if 10 people haven't come back, it's going to affect everything else. So there's such a human element to all this aside from the revenue as well.
And it makes it harder for leadership because part of what keeps people with their jobs, right, are the people around them.
Right.
It's their work family, if you will.
Yes.
And if you can't hold on to those people, it makes you far more likely to lose other people in that family. And that means you're going to have a hard time building your culture, which means you're going to have a hard time performing.
Right.
So all of this is linked. And there are not a lot of clear answers for how to work their way out of it.
Right. Craig, I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
And thank you, as always, for joining us and being patient with the background noise. We are at a conference. Take care, and we'll see you next time.